If you are a man over 60 who has noticed that your energy is not what it was, that your stamina has quietly dropped, that something in your physical vitality feels less accessible than it once did, and if your doctor has run blood work and told you that everything looks normal, but you still know something is off, then today's video is for you. Because the gap between what your blood tests show and what you are actually experiencing in your body may be explained by something that standard panels do not routinely measure: the progressive decline in your body's production of a molecule called nitric oxide. And understanding this molecule, what it does, why it declines with age, and most importantly, what you can do about it through the specific foods you eat every day, has the potential to genuinely change your experience of your own physical health in ways that go far beyond what most men over 60 have been told is possible. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes, a men's sex therapist with over a decade of experience working with different couples and helping men regain their sexual health and strength back. Today, I am going to give you the clinical foundation for understanding exactly what nitric oxide is, why your body's ability to produce it declines so significantly after 60, what the consequences of that decline are across every dimension of your physical experience, and then the 5 specific foods that research has identified as among the most effective dietary tools for supporting and restoring nitric oxide production. I am also going to explain something that almost no one discusses. The specific way you consume these foods matters as much as which foods you choose. And once you understand why, the practice I am going to describe will make complete clinical sense. Before we get into the content, please subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications. Every week, I publish content specifically designed to give men over 60 the clinically grounded, evidence-based, genuinely practical information about their vascular and sexual health that they deserve. Share this video with a man in your life over 60 who needs to hear this. Now, let us begin. What nitric oxide is and why it matters more after 60 than at any other point in your life. Nitric oxide is a simple molecule, a single nitrogen atom bonded to a single oxygen atom, and it is produced naturally and continuously inside the walls of your blood vessels by specialized cells called endothelial cells. These cells line every blood vessel in your body, from the largest arteries down to the finest capillaries, and their primary function is to regulate the tone and diameter of the vessels they line. They do this through the production of nitric oxide. When nitric oxide is released by endothelial cells into the smooth muscle of the vessel wall, it acts as a chemical signal instructing that muscle to relax. When the smooth muscle relaxes, the vessel diameter increases, a process called vasodilation. Vasodilation allows more blood to flow through the vessel, delivering more oxygen and more nutrients to the tissues that vessel supplies, and reducing the pressure required to move blood through the cardiovascular system. It also allows the endothelium itself to remain healthy, flexible, and responsive, rather than stiff, inflamed, and increasingly dysfunctional. The consequences of healthy nitric oxide production are felt throughout every system in the body. The heart receives better blood flow to its own muscle tissue through the coronary arteries. The brain receives better cerebral perfusion. The kidneys, liver, and every major organ maintain better tissue oxygenation. The skeletal muscles receive more efficient delivery of the oxygen and nutrients that support energy, stamina, and recovery. And specifically relevant to the men I work with, the erectile tissue of the penis receives the blood flow it requires because an erection is fundamentally a vascular event that depends entirely on the ability of the penile arteries to dilate adequately in response to arousal. And that dilation is mediated primarily by nitric oxide. It is worth pausing on this erectile dimension specifically because it illustrates the relationship between nitric oxide and male vitality with particular clarity. The penile arteries are among the smallest arteries in the human body, measuring approximately 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter. Because of their small size, they are the first arteries in the body to show the symptomatic effects of endothelial dysfunction and reduced nitric oxide production. The larger arteries of the heart and brain, 3 to 4 millimeters in diameter, can sustain a much greater degree of endothelial dysfunction before symptoms appear. This is why, as I have discussed in previous videos on this channel, erectile changes in men over 60 are clinically understood as a cardiovascular early warning signal. The vascular dysfunction that is producing those erectile changes is also present in the larger vessels, just not yet at the threshold of symptomatic severity. Supporting nitric oxide production through diet is therefore not a narrow intervention for sexual health alone. It is a comprehensive vascular intervention whose benefits extend to every organ and system that blood flow reaches. At 25, your body produced nitric oxide with an efficiency and volume that supported all of these systems comprehensively. But the production capacity of the endothelium declines progressively with age beginning somewhere in the 30s and continuing in a trajectory that accelerates after 50. By the time a man is in his 60s, his nitric oxide production capacity may be as low as 50% of what it was in his mid-20s. And this decline is not uniform. It is accelerated by every major cardiovascular risk factor: high blood pressure, high LDL cholesterol, elevated blood sugar, smoking history, physical inactivity, chronic psychological stress, and poor sleep. Most men over 60 are carrying at least some of these risk factors, and their cumulative effect on endothelial function, and therefore on nitric oxide production, is substantial. The result of this declining nitric oxide production is felt across every dimension of physical experience that men over 60 describe to me. The fatigue that appears earlier in the day than it once did. The reduced stamina in physical activity that was once unremarkable. The slower recovery after exertion. The changes in erectile quality that most men attribute entirely to age, but that are actually in large part a reflection of vascular function. The subtle cognitive changes that accompany reduced cerebral blood flow. All of these are the systemic expression of a vascular system that is producing less of the molecule it depends on to function at the level it was designed for. Here is the genuinely important thing I want you to understand before we go any further. The endothelium is not static. It is responsive. It produces nitric oxide in response to specific chemical stimuli. And many of those stimuli are provided by specific dietary compounds that exist in natural foods. The research on dietary approaches to supporting endothelial nitric oxide production is substantial, peer-reviewed, and clinically meaningful. And 5 of the best studied and most powerfully effective foods in this literature are what I am going to walk you through today. Before I describe each food, I need to explain one critical principle about how to consume them, because this is something that most sources overlook entirely, and it is genuinely important. Now, before I go further, I need to pause for a moment because everything I've just shared with you is just a quarter of the power-packed information I have for you. These are not small problems, and they don't have small solutions, but there is a complete solution, and I made a video about it. I put together a program that pieces the entire puzzle of men's sexual health together in one place, in the right order, like someone walking beside you every step of the way. We start with the physical, fixing erection and performance issues at the root level, not with quick fixes, but with real, lasting strategies. Then we move into technique, the exact skills that make a man a champion in the bedroom after 60, not despite his age, but because of the maturity, patience, and knowledge he now carries. And then we tackle the relational piece. How to get your partner to the same level of desire as you so that intimacy becomes something you both initiate, not something one of you endures. It is the most complete resource I've ever created for men over 60 who are serious about transforming their intimate lives. And I made a video that walks you through exactly what's inside it. The link to that video is pinned in the comment section right now, and it's also in the video description below. Go watch it after this video. It could genuinely change your life and your relationship. Now let's keep going because we still need to talk about what you can actually do with everything you've learned today. The role of oral bacteria and deliberate chewing in nitric oxide production. Your mouth is not simply the entry point through which food enters your digestive system. It is an active and essential part of the nitric oxide production pathway in your body, through a mechanism that involves the oral microbiome and the enzymatic activity of saliva. Many of the dietary nitrates and polyphenols that support nitric oxide production begin their conversion process in the mouth, not the stomach. Specifically, dietary nitrates, which are abundant in several of the foods I'm going to describe, are converted by bacteria naturally present on the surface of the tongue and in the oral mucosa into nitrites. Those nitrates are then swallowed and in the acidic environment of the stomach converted into nitric oxide and absorbed into the bloodstream. This oral, systemic nitric oxide pathway accounts for a substantial proportion of the dietary nitric oxide your body receives, and it is entirely dependent on adequate contact time between the food and the oral mucosa, adequate salivary enzymatic activity, and an intact oral microbiome. This is why the specific manner in which you consume these foods matters as much as which foods you eat. Chewing each of the 5 foods I am about to describe slowly and deliberately for a full 2 to 3 minutes before swallowing is not a performance or a ritual. It is the mechanism through which the oral conversion pathway is activated. When you rush through eating, when you swallow quickly, you bypass this pathway almost entirely and receive only a fraction of the vascular benefit that deliberate, extended chewing provides. I also need to mention something that directly undermines this pathway and that affects many men over 60: mouthwash. Commercial antibacterial mouthwash used daily substantially reduces the oral bacteria that perform the first step of the dietary nitric oxide conversion, clears throat. Research has found that men who use antibacterial mouthwash twice daily have measurably lower levels of circulating nitric oxide and higher blood pressure than those who do not. If your oral health routine includes daily antibacterial mouthwash, it is worth discussing with your dentist whether this is truly necessary for your specific situation, given the vascular cost it is imposing on your body every day. Now, with that understanding in place, let us go through the 5 foods. Clears throat. Food 1, raw cacao, the flavonoid-rich nitric oxide activator. The first food is raw cacao. And I want to be precise about what this means because the distinction between raw cacao and processed chocolate is clinically significant. Raw cacao beans and cacao nibs, which are simply crushed cacao beans, retain the full concentration of flavonoid compounds, specifically epicatechin and catechin, that are dramatically reduced during the heat processing and alkalization that produces conventional cocoa powder and chocolate products. The flavonoid content of raw cacao is typically 4 to 6 times higher than that of processed chocolate, and it is the flavonoids that produce the vascular benefit. These flavonoids work primarily by activating an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, abbreviated as ENOS. This is the enzyme inside the endothelial cells that is responsible for synthesizing nitric oxide. When epicatechin and catechin bind to their receptors in the endothelial cell membrane, they upregulate ENOS activity, effectively increasing the production output of the nitric oxide generating machinery that already exists in your blood vessel walls. Research published in cardiovascular and urological medicine journals has demonstrated measurable improvements in arterial flexibility, blood pressure, and blood flow markers in men who consume cacao flavonoids consistently. A landmark study in Hypertension Journal found that daily consumption of flavonoid-rich cacao produced significant reductions in blood pressure and improvements in endothelial function within 2 weeks. For men over 60, for whom endothelial dysfunction is a progressive and already well-established process, the magnitude of these improvements is clinically meaningful. How to consume it? Take a small portion of raw cacao nibs, approximately 1 tablespoon, place them in your mouth and chew them slowly and deliberately for a full 2 to 3 minutes before swallowing. The flavor is intensely bitter, very different from sweetened chocolate, and that bitterness is itself a marker of flavonoid concentration. The more bitter the cacao, the higher the flavonoid content and the more potent the vascular effect. Consume this first thing in the morning before coffee when absorption is highest and the oral microbiome is most active. Food 2, cloves, the antioxidant shield that protects nitric oxide. The second food addresses a dimension of the nitric oxide problem that the first food does not: the destruction of nitric oxide by oxidative stress. Your body may be producing nitric oxide through the ENOS pathway, but if the oxidative environment of the bloodstream is highly pro-inflammatory, that nitric oxide is being broken down by reactive oxygen species, primarily superoxide, before it can reach the smooth muscle cells of the blood vessels and produce vasodilation. The problem for men over 60 is that the oxidative load in the bloodstream increases with age, accelerated by the same risk factors that reduce nitric oxide production. The result is that even when production is partially supported, a significant proportion of what is produced is being oxidatively destroyed before it can work. Cloves address this directly. Gram for gram, whole-dried cloves have one of the highest antioxidant values of any food substance measured by the ORAC scale, the standard measure of antioxidant capacity in foods. The polyphenols in clove, particularly eugenol and its derivatives, are exceptionally potent scavengers of superoxide and other reactive oxygen species. When you consume cloves deliberately, those polyphenols circulate in the bloodstream and neutralize the reactive oxygen species that would otherwise destroy nitric oxide before it can act. Think of this as the difference between trying to heat a house while the windows are open versus closing them first. Supporting nitric oxide production without also reducing oxidative destruction is like the former. Cloves help close the windows. Beyond their antioxidant function, cloves also have well-documented microcirculatory benefits, supporting blood flow specifically in the smaller, finer vessels of the body. This is particularly important for penile perfusion, which depends on the function of vessels that are among the smallest in the vascular system. How to consume: take 1 to 2 whole dried cloves, place them in your mouth and chew them very slowly and deliberately for 2 to 3 minutes. The flavor is intense and initially medicinal. Accept it. What is happening in your bloodstream during and after those 3 minutes is worth considerably more than the discomfort of a bold flavor. Food 3. Pomegranate, the dual-action vascular protector. The third food is one that consistently surprises the men I work with, not because pomegranate is unfamiliar, but because its specific mechanism of action for male vascular and sexual health is so well supported by the research literature and so rarely discussed outside of specialist circles. Pomegranate contains a dense concentration of polyphenols and anthocyanins that work through 2 distinct and complementary mechanisms on the nitric oxide pathway, which is why researchers in the field of vascular and neurological health have described it as having a dual action effect. The first mechanism is direct upregulation of ENOS activity, similar to what the cacao flavonoids do, stimulating the endothelial cells to produce more nitric oxide. The second mechanism is unique to pomegranate among commonly available foods. Pomegranate polyphenols inhibit an enzyme called arginase. Arginase is responsible for breaking down L-arginine, which is the amino acid substrate that the ENOS enzyme uses as its raw material to manufacture nitric oxide. When arginase activity is high, L-arginine is diverted away from nitric oxide synthesis. When arginase is inhibited by pomegranate polyphenols, more L-arginine remains available for the ENOS enzyme to use, amplifying production. Multiple clinical studies on pomegranate and male vascular function have found significant improvements in erectile function scores, endothelial function markers, and blood pressure in men who consume pomegranate consistently over periods of 4 to 12 weeks. How to consume: eat fresh pomegranate seeds, also called arils, and chew them slowly and deliberately for 2 to 3 minutes. Do not simply swallow them whole or drink commercial pomegranate juice, which is pasteurized at temperatures that reduce polyphenol integrity. Fresh seeds consumed with deliberate extended chewing provide maximum mucosal contact and oral conversion pathway activation. Food for amla, the ancient protector with modern scientific validation. The fourth food has been used in traditional medicine systems, particularly Ayurveda, for well over 1,000 years, specifically for male vitality and vascular function. Modern research is now providing the molecular explanation for what traditional practitioners observed empirically over centuries. Amla, also known as Indian gooseberry, contains one of the highest natural concentrations of vitamin C of any food source on Earth. A single fresh amla fruit contains approximately 20 times the vitamin C of an orange by weight. But the significance of this vitamin C concentration for nitric oxide goes beyond general antioxidant protection. Vitamin C has a specific and well-documented interaction with the nitric oxide pathway. It directly neutralizes superoxide, the reactive oxygen species most responsible for destroying nitric oxide in the bloodstream, more effectively than almost any other dietary antioxidant. It also regenerates tetrahydrobiopterin, a cofactor that the ENOS enzyme requires to function properly. When tetrahydrobiopterin levels are low, ENOS becomes dysfunctional and actually produces superoxide instead of nitric oxide. A phenomenon called ENOS uncoupling further damages the endothelium. Vitamin C from amla supports the cofactor that keeps ENOS functioning correctly. Beyond vitamin C, amla contains tannins and additional polyphenolic compounds that have demonstrated measurable vasodilatory effects in their own right in clinical and laboratory studies. For men over 60, the combination of vitamin C-mediated nitric oxide protection and direct vasodilatory polyphenols makes amla one of the most comprehensively supportive dietary tools available for endothelial function. Amla is available at most South Asian grocery stores in fresh, dried, or powdered form. Fresh slices or whole-dried amla consumed with deliberate 2 to 3 minute chewing provide the full spectrum of compounds. The flavor is simultaneously tart, astringent, and slightly sweet, an unusual combination that reflects the complexity of its phytochemical profile. Food 5, blueberries, the everyday fruit with profound vascular effects. The fifth food is one that most men over 60 already have in their homes, and that is being consistently and significantly underestimated as a vascular health intervention. Blueberries contain a particularly potent class of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds, including pterostilbene, resveratrol, and a dense concentration of anthocyanins, the pigments responsible for their characteristic deep blue-purple color. These compounds have been studied extensively for their effects on vascular health, and the research findings are compelling across multiple dimensions that are directly relevant to men over 60. The anthocyanins in blueberries have been shown in peer-reviewed studies to directly reduce endothelial inflammation, one of the primary drivers of age-related vascular decline. They improve arterial compliance, which is the technical term for the elasticity and flexibility of artery walls that decreases as atherosclerosis and age-related stiffening progress. They promote nitric oxide bioavailability through both reduced oxidative destruction and increased ENOS expression. And they support healthy platelet function, reducing the tendency toward excessive clotting that increases with age and that impedes blood flow dynamics throughout the cardiovascular system. For men over 60, in whom endothelial inflammation has been building for decades, often silently and without clinical detection, the consistent anti-inflammatory effect of regular blueberry consumption represents a meaningful intervention in the trajectory of vascular aging. How to consume: eat them raw, never cooked or processed, in portions of approximately half a cup. Chew deliberately for 2 to 3 full minutes, allowing maximum contact between the anthocyanins and your oral mucosa, and activating the oral conversion pathway. The deliberate chewing of blueberries may feel unnecessary given how soft they are, but the extended contact time with the oral microbiome and mucosal tissue is the mechanism, not an affectation. Bringing it all together, a sustainable daily practice. I want to close with a framework for how to integrate all 5 of these foods into a daily practice that is realistic, sustainable, and that compounds in its vascular benefits over time. The most effective approach is to consume these foods in the morning, before or with your first meal, when the oral microbiome is most active and the digestive system is most absorptive. Consuming all 5 in sequence, each with 2 to 3 minutes of deliberate chewing, takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes in total. That is a meaningful but entirely accessible investment for men who are serious about supporting their vascular health. The benefits are not immediate in the sense of being felt within a single day, but they are consistent and cumulative over weeks. Research studies examining dietary interventions for nitric oxide production typically find measurable improvements in vascular function markers within 2 to 4 weeks of consistent daily consumption. Clinical improvements in erectile function in the studies that have measured this specifically tend to show significance at 4 to 8 weeks. Now, if everything I've shared today has resonated with you, if you've been sitting here nodding and thinking, this is exactly what I need, then I want you to do one thing before you close this video. Go watch the video I made about my program. The Snorts link is pinned in the comment section right now, and it's in the video description below this video. This program takes everything we talked about today and everything we didn't have time to cover and walks you through it step by step from beginning to end, like I'm right there in the room with you. We cover how to fix erection and performance issues at the root, not with pills that only work in the moment, but with real strategies that restore your body's natural capacity. We cover the exact techniques that make men champions in the bedroom after 60, things most men never learn, things that will make her look at you like she hasn't looked at you in years. And we cover the relational side, how to close the desire gap, how to get her wanting you the way you want her, how to rebuild the kind of intimacy that makes both of you feel young again. Everything is pieced together, nothing is left out, and it is designed specifically for men like you, men who are done settling, men who want more, men who know their best years in the bedroom are still ahead of them. The link, Clear's Throat, is in the comments, it's in the description. Go watch it. You've already taken the first step by watching this video. Don't stop now. I am Dr. Julia Rhodes. I will see you in the next video.